Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rebuild, coming to you with episode 43 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Build, we're uncovering more of the story surrounding Shinobu Katsuragi, which would be Sento's dad, and why exactly he's been helping out Evil this entire time. Now we're finding out a lot more about him in the first battle, and over the course of the episode we're going to see the theories that the characters have about what his motivations are, but up till now, we haven't learned a lot about him, basically because we thought he was dead until the last episode or two. Now before we get further into discussing who exactly Shinobu is, we do need to cover what exactly we're going to call him once he does transform, since essentially he is another build, which is actually the title of the episode, so it really comes down to one of two ideas. One, we can call him another build, or best build, since he refers to himself as the best possible build there is, but going off the episode title, we're just going to refer to him as another build, or just Shinobu. Now in this initial fight between Cross, Grease, and Rogue, we see that another build has all of the base capabilities that we've seen builds use, but he's able to better utilize them. And of course, since the inventor always knows the product best, we see here that that accuracy, that just in-tuneness with the build system comes from Shinobu, and he's able to defeat them all very quickly and almost completely take out Grease. Now over the course of this fight, we find out two things about Shinobu. One, that the build driver was of course built for his use specifically, not for Sento, and two, it was his idea for Sento and Ryuga to become riders in the first place, which means either he really doesn't care about his family or other people that he's manipulating, much like Evil, or two, he may just be a jerk. Now as I kind of brought up in recent weeks, if he is a jerk, he joins the ranks of several other jerk dads in Kamen Rider, like Gold Drive, Cronus, Dark Spectre, and White Wizard over past series. Now as we've been discussing for the last couple of weeks, Sento is the type of personality that needs to believe in people, but even more so when that person is blood related to him. So at this point, when we see that Ryuga has the Evil genes taking over him, and he's really giving the beat down to Shinobu, Build steps in and saves him. Now of course this is a controversial decision, which kind of fractures the team for the rest of the episode. Now logically speaking, the team does have a right to be mad at Sento, and at the same time Sento did have his reasons. We'll go ahead and start with Grease and Rogue. Because Build stepped in and took the hit that Ryuga was going to give out, they decide that they can't trust him since his objectivity just isn't there right now. Now in the background we do see that they do want to help him, but right now he's kind of a liability. Sento isn't thinking clearly, and again, the villains have figured out if you can take away Sento's best ability, his mind, then he's basically useless no matter what power he has. Now unfortunately Ryuga has no say in this because of the attack that Sento doled out to him, and he's knocked out for the better part of the episode, which leaves Sento in kind of a funk, and an understandable one. He's frustrated because he can't reconcile his ideals with what he's found out about the system that he's been using. Now this does lead into another conversation with Misora and Sento about what exactly he's fighting for. Now right now he's having a hard time reconciling all of these things together, and Misora's trying to be there to be the person to tell him exactly what he needs to hear, but unfortunately since it's been too soon after the fight, Misora's words just don't reach him. Now I find it interesting how everybody in this episode is essentially on the same page, they're just going about how they feel differently. Kazumi and Gentoku take it upon themselves to try and help Sento away from him since they figure they're not going to help him right up front, but Misora wants to get right in there and help him out because of course she means a lot to him and him to her. Unfortunately, this leads her to make a kind of controversial decision in that she listens to a phone call from Evil saying that she can help him if she follows his demands. Now really at this point, Misora has no business talking to Evil, especially now that we know that the Evil that we see here is just the visage of her father. It's not actually her father, he's still in the hospital. But we see that Misora is going to any length that she can to go ahead and help Sento, and eventually Ryuga will too. Now initially Misora would have helped out Ryuga as well, but unfortunately with Vernage's weakened power, she just can't do that. But thankfully Evil and Shinobu came up with an idea for that. Because they're short on Lost Smashes, they decide to go ahead and incorporate that idea into Misora, i.e. turn her into a new Lost Smash, the CD Lost Smash, and have her regenerate Vernage's power. Now that decision doesn't make a lot of sense either, because Vernage is the one power that could potentially stand up to Evil in this time, since she already did it on Mars. But at this point, Evil must be thinking he's that far ahead that he could go ahead and control Vernage as well. Now of course, in order to turn her into a Lost Smash, we see that she's doused with the same amount of nebula gas that the Hokuto trio, that the Hell Brothers, and Sawatari were doused with, meaning that if she's defeated in battle, she will die. So when Sento does finally show up on the battlefield to see what's happened to Misora, he's faced with essentially an impossible decision. How does he save Misora without hurting Vernage, who is technically still their best chance at beating Evil? When he finally does question his dad about his motives, he tells him that this is all a means to an end. Shinobu actually doesn't care about his son or his family. He didn't mind telling them that he was dead. This is all for some greater scientific purpose, which is kind of making him a lot more like Utsumi than Sento, in that the father and the son aren't actually alike. But personality aside, I think he actually has more in common with Utsumi than just that. I think that based off a conversation that Sento has with himself, with Katsuragi, that they've theorized that potentially Shinobu isn't actually under Evil's control, since the Kamen Rider process should have given him his mind back after being exposed to the light of Pandora's box initially. What we're seeing here is that there's a possibility that he just feels that he's gone too far in and he can't back out now, i.e. he couldn't go against Evil right now because Evil would just kill him. So then at that point the story becomes an idea of redemption. Could Sento potentially get through to his dad before something terrible happens to him as well? But for right now we still have to deal with Misora, but Sento can't exactly do that when he's on the floor crying. And this thankfully is where Ryuga steps in. Now, we do actually have to acknowledge the growth of Ryuga as a character, because in subsequent episodes, especially when we got Genius form, we see that when Ryuga does try to motivate Sento, he's doing it in a very brash, loud sense, which is very much in keeping with his character. But in this particular episode, he doesn't shout at all. In fact, he's actually very calm about it, reminding Sento about his own ideals and sense of justice, that it's not imaginary. If they believe in it, they can make it happen, and if real justice is saving Misora, shouldn't he do that now? This really goes to show just how much of an effect their friendship has had on one another. Sento has very much rubbed off on Ryuga and vice versa. Sento feels that he can take more action now, and Ryuga is actually a little bit more level-headed, except when he gets into battle. So once Build and Cross do transform, we're still faced with this decision of what exactly we're going to do about Misora, and the additional fact that unfortunately Ryuga could also wipe us all out with the black hole of his own. So we see Sento think about this for a second and comes up with a way to kill two birds with one stone without killing any birds. Essentially what he does is remove Vernage's essence from Misora and transfer it over to Ryuga. That way Vernage's power and Evil's influence cancel each other out. Now that does make sense, since we see that Vernage's power was able to hold back Evil on Mars to the point that he was separated from his body then. So the math kind of holds up there, but the question now is just how much power does Misora have now, if any? But now that the threat has been taken care of, we see that Sento is able to take on his father one-on-one, and he's able to actually eject the rabbit full bottle from his father's build driver, and he's able to transmute that now, which means he has reached hazard level 7 as well. Now I didn't realize this last week when we saw the transmutation with Ryuga, but this is actually tying into the movie Be the One that's coming out next month, when we see that we've got two full bottles now, the silver dragon bottle and the gold rabbit bottle. These are actually going to provide the movie form that Build's going to use in that movie. So thankfully Shinobu was defeated by Build and Cross by way of a double rider punch, and I always appreciate when that's used. But unfortunately going into next week's episode, we're going to see that unfortunately Gentoku and Sawatari were captured, and we're actually going to see the conclusion of Build versus Build. So overall in this episode, it was kind of basic in the storytelling. We were just kind of moving things along and moving them forward. I do appreciate the use of the comedy in the episode, now that we see that Gentoku has developed this new character tick of communicating through t-shirts that he happens to have on. And I do appreciate that Kazumi asks him directly, how long have you been wearing that shirt? Like, were you waiting for me to say something specifically so you could show that off? And initially, I was kind of weirded out by the body pillow that Sawa showed up with, but at this point, there's so many things going on in the background that I'm not going to worry about it that much. And even though we've seen a lot of this father-son battling throughout Kamen Rider over the years, it's interesting that we're throwing that in here kind of in the last minute, in the 11th hour here of the show. But it's kind of going to be done away with very quickly, so I'm wondering why they even threw it in there at all, since technically we still have to deal with Evil. But those of course are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about a few things. First off, Misora. Even though she still has the bracelet on her hand, do you think that she still retains any sort of power from Vernage? Secondly, Shinobu. Do you think that he's like Utsumi and he's kind of manipulating Sento to do things in a positive way without giving away his actual plan? And thirdly, based off the merchandise that we saw in this episode, which would you rather purchase? The Misora body pillow or these new Gentoku shirts? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 43 of Rider Rebuild. For episode 43 of Kamen Rider Build, another build. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next episode.